The hum was the first thing I noticed. A low, thrumming buzz of 100 simultaneous conversations, punctuated by the sharp, cheerful clink of champagne flutes and undercut by the saccharine melody of a pop song that had been ubiquitous a decade ago. It was the soundtrack of the 10-year reunion, and it was the soundtrack of my own quietly simmering anxiety. I'd only agreed to come for Alex. My hand was tucked securely in his, a familiar, grounding weight in the undulating sea of vaguely familiar faces and aggressively updated life stories. Alex, my Alex, with his kind, crinkly-eyed smile and a voice that could still make my stomach perform a familiar, pleasant flip after 2 solid years, was in his element. He was a natural charmer, a listener, and people were drawn to the easy, confident warmth he radiated. I watched him laugh at a former teammate's joke, his head thrown back, and I felt a surge of that old, protective love. This was his world, these ghosts of his glory days, and I was happy to be his anchor in the noise. "Nervous?" he murmured, his lips close to my ear, his breath a warm caress against my skin that momentarily drowned out the din. "A little," I admitted, squeezing his hand. "It feels like walking onto a stage where everyone else has the script but me. So many people I barely remember and they all seem to have opinions." "You," he said, turning to face me fully, his gaze so sincere it almost hurt, "are the most stunning person in this entire room. You have nothing to be nervous about. They're all probably looking at you and wondering how I managed to land someone so far out of my league." I leaned into him, letting the solid reality of his shoulder against my temple bolster my confidence. "Flatterer. Truth-teller," he corrected softly, planting a quick kiss on my forehead. We navigated the crowded hotel ballroom, a space drowning in navy blue and gold drapery, the school colors a persistent, almost aggressive reminder of where we were. Him greeting old teammates with backslaps and wide grins, me smiling politely at their wives and dates, making small talk about careers in real estate and whether we'd changed much. It was comfortable. Safe. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this man, for the quiet, stable life we were building together in our sun-drenched apartment with its view of the park. We were talking about rings, about maybe looking at houses next spring. The future was a tangible, beautiful thing, laid out before us like a pristine runway. And then I saw her. It was like a drop of blood in a snowfield. She was standing near the bar, a vision in a slash of crimson silk that was both timeless and cutting-edge, a dress that knew its power and wielded it without apology. Chloe. Even after 10 years, I recognized her instantly from the photos Alex had once, reluctantly, shown me on a lazy Sunday morning, prompted by a story I'd told about my own awkward high school romance. The high school sweetheart. The first love. The one who got away, though in this case, got away, was a polite euphemism for, dumped him spectacularly to pursue a modeling career in Milan. She hadn't just aged, she had crystallized. Where time had given the rest of us laugh lines, a softer physique and the gentle wisdom of lived experience, it had sharpened Chloe, honing her into something even more potent and dangerous. Her blonde hair wasn't just blonde. It was a sleek, platinum sheet falling like a waterfall of liquid metal to her shoulders. Her posture wasn't just good. It was a study in effortless superiority, her spine straight, her chin slightly elevated as if the air the rest of us breathed was beneath her. She was a sculpture and we were all unfinished clay. I felt Alex's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around mine. His easy, flowing chatter about the guy who just told us about his third kid died a sudden, abrupt death in his throat. The shift in him was palpable, a sudden tension thrumming through his arm into mine. "Alex, is that?" I started, but the words felt foolish. Of course it was her. He was already moving, pulled by an invisible tether I couldn't feel but whose power was undeniable. "Chloe?" he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and something else, something that made a small, cold knot form in the pit of my stomach. An old, forgotten warmth. She turned, and her smile was a weapon, designed to disarm and devastate. "Alexander. My God, you look exactly the same." Her voice was lower than I'd imagined, a husky contralto that carried an intimate weight. Her eyes, the color of a shallow tropical sea, flickered over him with a practiced, appreciative sweep, then landed on me, cool and assessing. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "And who is this?" "This is Lena," Alex said, seeming to remember I was physically attached to him. He slipped an arm around my waist, a gesture that felt more possessive than protective now. "My girlfriend." Lena, this is Chloe. We went to school together. The famous Chloe, I said, extending my hand, forcing my lips into a smile that felt like it might crack at the corners. It's nice to finally meet you. Alex has mentioned you. I kept my tone light, neutral. A peace offering. Her handshake was limp, brief, her fingers cool and smooth as marble. Likewise. The word was dismissive. Her attention immediately returned to Alex, a laser locking onto its target. I was just back in town for a shoot and thought, why not? See if any of the old crowd is still around. I can't believe you're here. You never left. The question was layered with a subtle implication that staying was a form of failure. And just like that, I was wallpaper. For the next 20 minutes, I stood by Alex's side, a silent sentinel to their immersive walk down memory lane. I heard about the championship football game where he'd thrown the winning pass to her brother. I suffered through the saga of Mr. Henderson's disastrous chemistry class, where they'd been lab partners and almost set the school on fire. I was given a front row seat to the story of the summer they'd packed a tent and a cooler and driven to the coast with no map and no plan, sleeping on beaches and living on gas station food. Each anecdote was a brick, carefully laid, walling me out of a past I could never be part of, a history that belonged only to them. Alex was laughing, his eyes bright, his entire being focused on her, completely captivated. He was the boy he'd been a decade ago, and I was a ghost in his present. I tried to interject a few times, to gently pull the conversation into the present, into our world. That sounds so adventurous. Alex and I are more about planned itineraries these days, aren't we, honey? We went to Tuscany last fall But Chloe would skillfully steer it back to their shared galaxy with a light tinkling laugh that somehow managed to sound both girlish and condescending. Oh, how lovely for you. But you should have seen us, Alex, remember? We were so broke we shared a single order of fries for dinner that second night. The hot, prickling sensation at the back of my neck intensified. It was insecurity, I told myself firmly. Jealousy, the green-eyed monster. Be the bigger person. Be confident. You're the one he comes home to. You're the one he talks about mortgages with. Eventually, the trio we'd arrived with, Mark, Alex's best friend since childhood, and his wife, Sarah, my closest friend in the city, came over, creating a welcome distraction. Greetings were exchanged, hugs given, and the dynamic shifted. The bubble of Alex and Chloe was popped. I was included again, brought into the circle by Sarah's warm arm linked through mine. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I'm parched, Chloe announced, as if the effort of socializing with more than one person at a time was a tremendous strain. Alex, be a darling and fetch me a gin and tonic? You still remember how I like it. A simple, reasonable request. But the way she said it, the proprietary tone, the assumption of a shared, unbroken intimacy, sent a fresh jolt of unease straight through my core. It was a test, and I held my breath waiting for his answer. Alex, ever the gentleman, nodded. A little too quickly. Of course. Tanqueray, a splash of tonic, 2 limes. I remember. He'd remembered. Of course he'd remembered. He turned to me, his expression softening. Lena, another white wine? Please, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. The Sauvignon Blanc suddenly seemed like a pathetic, feeble choice. He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that now felt patronizing, and headed towards the bar, swallowed by the crowd. The moment he was out of earshot, Chloe's pleasant, social mask slipped completely. She turned that glacial sea-green gaze on me, and the temperature around us seemed to drop 10 degrees. So Lena, she began, her voice a low, conspiratorial purr that excluded everyone but me, and only for the purpose of dissection. 2 years, Alex tells me. That's quite a run for him. I kept my expression neutral, a skill I'd honed in client meetings with difficult contractors. We're very happy. I kept my voice even, refusing to give her the satisfaction of hearing any tremor. I'm sure you are. She took a deliberate sip from a water glass a waiter had left on a nearby table. He always was a creature of comfort. He likes things easy, uncomplicated. The insult was veiled in silk, but it landed with the force of a sledgehammer. She was implying I was easy, uncomplicated, boring, a comfortable couch he'd settled into. There's a profound difference between comfort and compatibility, I replied, my tone as steady as I could make it. We have the latter. It's what makes a partnership last. She smiled, a thin, cruel line that didn't reach her eyes. Compatibility, That's a word people use when the passion has fizzled, don't you think? What Alex and I had, that was a fire. A bonfire. You can't manufacture that. It either exists or it doesn't. It can't be built on shared errands and matching coffee mugs. I felt my cheeks grow warm. She was dismantling my relationship, my future, with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. The past is a nice place to visit, Chloe, but I wouldn't want to live there. And Alex doesn't either. I was proud of that line. It sounded strong. Her eyes flashed with a spark of genuine annoyance. I'd pierced the armor. Doesn't he? You saw him just now. He lit up. That's not the past, darling. That's an ember. And embers, with the right breath, can become a flame again. I'd had enough. The civility was a fraying thread. I took a step back, creating physical distance. I think I'll go help Alex with the drinks. It seems like a two-person job. As I turned away from her, my back now to her, it happened. It was so swift, so perfectly choreographed, that for a split second I almost believed it was real. She stumbled, her body lurching forward with a little gasp. The full glass of ice water in her hand tipped, its contents arcing through the air in a glittering, cruel cascade before crashing directly into my chest. The cold was a shock, a brutal physical slap. I gasped, my body recoiling as the water soaked instantly through my delicate silk blouse, plastering the expensive fabric to my skin in a transparent, clinging veil. It dripped in icy rivulets down my stomach, my ribs, between my breasts, and onto the skirt of my dress, darkening the fabric. The ice cubes, like little diamonds of malice, skittered across the polished floor, the sound absurdly loud in the sudden bubble of silence that had formed around us. My face burned with a mixture of the cold and utter, searing humiliation. I stood there, frozen, my arms slightly outstretched, staring down at my ruined clothes. It was no accident. The smirk she tried to hide by bringing her hand to her mouth, the calculated angle of her wrist. It was all a deliberate, vicious performance. Oh my God! Chloe cried, her voice dripping with a theatrical false concern that was more insulting than the water itself. You clumsy thing! You bumped right into me. Look at your top. It's ruined. All eyes were on us. I saw the shock on Sarah's face, her hand flying to her mouth. I saw the awkward, uncomfortable shift in Mark's posture. I saw the curious, pitying, and in some cases, amused stares from a dozen other former classmates. I was a spectacle. A drenched, humiliated spectacle. And then Alex was there, holding 2 glasses of white wine and a gin and tonic with 2 limes, his face a canvas of confusion and dawning alarm. What happened? He asked, his eyes darting from my dripping form to Chloe's perfectly composed, photostraught one. Chloe was on him in an instant, her hand on his arm, her voice a tremulous, wounded thing. Alex, it was so awful. I was just standing here and Lena turned and shoved right past me. She spilled my entire glass of water all over herself. I think she's upset about something. I tried to tell her it was just an accident, but the blatant, brazen lie stole the breath from my lungs. I looked at Alex, my eyes wide, pleading. See through her. See me. See the truth. See the water on my clothes, the shock on my face. See the woman you love, standing here humiliated. Believe me. His gaze moved from Chloe's perfectly composed, concerned face to mine, dripping, disheveled, and furious. His brow furrowed not in sympathy for me but in confusion. In doubt. Lena, did you? He started, his tone hesitant, tinged with a hint of accusation. Did you bump into her? The world narrowed to that single point. The point where he stood with her hand possessively on his arm, questioning me. Believing her. Choosing her word over the evidence of his own eyes, over the 2 years of my character he supposedly knew. The cold water on my skin was nothing compared to the absolute zero that flooded my veins. The burning humiliation curdled, transforming in an instant into something else entirely. Something cold, hard, sharp, and infinitely, terrifyingly patient. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't call her a liar. I looked directly at Alex, my voice quiet but clear, cutting through the nervous murmurs of the onlookers. You believe that? He had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight. It was just an accident, Lee, he said, using the diminutive he reserved for tender moments, now making it sound like a placation. No need to make a scene. Let's just get you cleaned up. He reached for my arm, but I flinched away from his touch. No need to make a scene. He had chosen. In that moment, with that single dismissive phrase, he had chosen her side. He had chosen the beautiful, convenient, dramatic lie over the messy, complicated, humiliated truth of me. He had chosen to protect his own comfort and his nostalgic fantasy over protecting me. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger. The man I loved, the man I was going to build a life with, was gone, replaced by a boy still dazzled by a ghost from his past. A slow, calm smile touched my lips. It felt foreign and terrifying on my face. A mask of serenity pulled over a roiling volcano. The old Lena, the one who believed in love and fairness, was being washed away by the ice water, leaving someone new in her place. "Of course," I said, my voice eerily steady, devoid of all the emotion that was screaming inside my head. "An accident. How silly of me." I turned and walked towards the restrooms, my wet clothes clinging to me, the eyes of the entire reunion burning into my back. But with each step the humiliation faded, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. The world had shifted on its axis. The runway of our future had crumbled into dust. He thought the nightmare was over. A little spilled water, a minor embarrassment for his apparently jealous and clumsy girlfriend. He would smooth it over later with flowers and apologies, and life would return to its comfortable, predictable pattern. He had no idea. He had just handed a stranger the keys to his kingdom. His nightmare had just begun. The ladies' room was a temple of gilded mirrors and overpowering floral air freshener, a stark, sanitized bubble separate from the humid chaos of the ballroom. I locked myself in the largest stall, leaning my forehead against the cool, solid metal of the door, and finally allowed the tremor to take me. It started in my hands, a fine, violent shaking that made my knuckles ache, then traveled up my arms and into my core. A seismic shudder that felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. It wasn't from the cold, though my soaked blouse was a clammy, icy shroud against my skin. It was the aftershock of the betrayal, the psychological whiplash of the ground giving way beneath my feet. He chose her side. The words echoed in the silent, sterile space, each repetition a hammer blow to my heart, shattering the beautiful stained glass image of our future I had so carefully constructed. I replayed the moment in excruciating high-definition detail. The shocking physical slap of the ice water, the sound of Chloe's fake gasping, "Oh!" The feel of 100 eyes on my drenched, pathetic body, and finally the look on Alex's face, not of concern for me, his partner of 2 years, but of annoyance. Annoyance that I was causing a scene. That I was disrupting the perfect, nostalgic narrative of his reunion with his first love. The person who was supposed to be my harbor had looked at me like I was the storm. A hot, traitorous tear finally escaped, tracing a scalding path through my carefully applied makeup. I swiped at it angrily, my wet sleeve smudging it across my cheek. No. There would be no more tears for him. Not here. Not now. The tears were for the Lena who believed in fairy tales. The Lena who thought loyalty was a given, a non-negotiable foundation stone. That Lena was gone, washed away by that glass of water and the tidal wave of humiliation that followed. She had drowned in front of everyone, and the person who was supposed to throw her a lifeline had instead handed her an anchor. With a violent, jerky movement, I stripped off the ruined silk blouse. It was one of my favorites, a delicate sky blue thing I'd saved for and bought for a summer picnic date with Alex in the park. We'd fed each other strawberries and he'd told me he was falling in love with me. Now it was a sad, wrinkled rag, a symbol of my own naivete, the delicate fabric irreparably water-stained. I balled it up with a grimace of disgust and shoved it deep into the small stainless steel trash bin, a satisfyingly violent gesture. I was left standing in my lace-trimmed camisole, the thin strap damp and cold. My reflection in the full-length mirror on the stall door was a mess. Smudged mascara creating dark shadows under my eyes, my usually smooth hair plastered in wet tendrils to my neck and temples, my eyes wide and shocky, the eyes of a prey animal that had just escaped a trap. But deep within those eyes, past the raw hurt and the shimmer of unshed tears, something new was stirring. Something cold and clear and certain. This was not an end, it was an initiation. A baptism by ice water into a new, harder reality. The pain was a catalyst and it was transforming me from the inside out. The door to the restroom swung open with a soft whoosh, letting in a burst of muffled party noise. The thumping bass of the music, the rise and fall of laughter, and the sharp, confident click-clack of high heels on marble. Unbelievable. Did you see that? A woman's voice said. It was Sarah. My friend Sarah. Her voice was tight with anger. I saw, another voice replied. Maya, a sharp, witty woman from our year who'd always been perceptive. Chloe totally did that on purpose. What a classic move. The drama queen is back in town and she's already claiming her throne. My breath hitched. I stayed perfectly still, a statue in my stall, listening. This was the court of public opinion and I was on trial. And Alex, Sarah continued, her voice thick with a disgust that felt like a balm on my wounded soul. I thought he was smarter than that. I thought he was one of the good ones. To just stand there and let that witch manipulate him like that? To not even defend Lena? I saw his face. He believed Chloe. I wanted to throttle him. I absolutely wanted to throttle him. Men are idiots when it comes to their first love, Maya sighed, and I heard the sound of a compact snapping open and shut. It's like their brains short-circuit. They revert to their teenage selves, all hormones and nostalgia. Logic and loyalty just evaporate. Poor Lena. She must be utterly mortified. That blouse was gorgeous and now it's ruined. And the way everyone was staring. Poor Lena. The pity in their voices, though well-intentioned, was like a spark on dry tinder. It ignited something fierce and proud inside me. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want to be the subject of their sympathetic clucking. I wanted one day for them to say, remember when Chloe poured water on Lena? That was the day Chloe signed her own social death warrant. That was the day Lena Rossi became a force of nature. Pity was for victims. And I was done being a victim. The two women finished their business, their conversation fading as they exited, the door sighing shut behind them. The room was silent again, but the echo of their words remained, hanging in the perfumed air. Poor Lena. Men are idiots. I walked out of the stall and stood before the bank of illuminated mirrors. I looked like a wreck, but I no longer felt like one. I turned on the cold tap and splashed water on my face again and again, washing away the streaks of mascara, the smudged blush, the remnants of my tears. I patted my skin dry with a stiff paper towel, the abrasive texture feeling like an exfoliation of my old self. I looked at my clean, bare face in the mirror. My skin was pale, my eyes still a little red-rimmed, but they were no longer shocky. They were focused. Resolute. They were the eyes of an architect surveying a catastrophic structural failure and already beginning to sketch the plans for the demolition. Revenge. It's such an ugly, dramatic word, conjuring images of poisoned goblets and bloody knives. I wasn't going to key his car or slash his tires. That was the anger of the moment, the impulsive, brutish reaction of the deeply wounded. It was messy, traceable, and ultimately unsatisfying. What I was planning was different. It was colder, more calculated, more me. It was about restructuring reality. It was about applying pressure to the precise points that would cause his entire world to collapse under the weight of its own inherent weaknesses. I needed him to feel what I felt. Not just the hurt, but the profound, ground-shifting humiliation of being betrayed by the person you trust most. I needed him to lose something he valued, something he thought was secure. His career, his reputation, his comfortable social standing, his sense of himself as a good, smart, capable man. And I needed to do it in a way that was so clean, so untraceable, so elegantly woven into the fabric of his own choices and bad luck, that he would never even know it was me. He would simply experience it as a series of unfortunate events, a slow-motion unraveling of his perfect life, until he was left with nothing but the hollow echo of the choice he made tonight in that ballroom. The how was the question. Alex was a successful, if somewhat complacent, financial advisor. His life was built on a tripod of stability. His career and financial acumen, his social circle and reputation, and his comfortable, stable partnership with me. They were his pillars, the things that propped up his identity. One by one they would crumble. But I couldn't be the one swinging the sledgehammer. I had to be the termite, quietly, invisibly hollowing out the wood from the inside until the whole structure sagged and fell in on itself. An idea, dark and elegant, began to form in my mind, its lines sharp and clear against the blank canvas of my rage. It was risky. It required immense patience, specific resources, and a complete transformation of self. The Lena he knew was kind, a little quiet, an architectural designer who loved her job, enjoyed cooking dinner with her boyfriend, and believed in the fundamental goodness of people. That Lena was a liability. She was predictable. She would cry, she would rage, she would eventually forgive. She was soft. The Lena who would orchestrate his nightmare needed to be someone else entirely. She needed to be sharper, harder, utterly self-possessed. She needed to be a ghost in his machine, a glitch in his matrix. She needed to be untouchable. I pulled out my phone from my small clutch. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Alex and 2 text messages. I didn't read them. My thumb hovered over his name for a moment, a final fleeting pang of something, loss maybe, before I deleted the notification. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled past A past B down to the T's. To a name I hadn't dialed in years. Julian Thorne. Julian was an acquaintance from my final year of architecture school. A brilliant, shadowy figure who moved in circles I'd always consciously avoided. He wasn't an architect, he was a corporate strategist, a fixer for lack of a better term, a man who understood the hidden levers of power, information and human weakness in a way that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. We'd been paired together for a brutal, semester-long project designing a theoretical corporate headquarters. He'd handled the business plan, the financial projections, the stakeholder analysis, while I'd focused on the design and spatial dynamics. We'd spent long, caffeine-fueled nights in the studio, and I'd seen a mind that worked like a supercomputer, processing variables and outcomes with chilling efficiency. He'd once told me after a few too many beers at the project's completion party, "You have a ruthless mind, Lena. It's buried under all that kindness and empathy, but it's there. I see the way you solve spatial problems. You don't just make things fit, you reconfigure the entire system to your will. Don't ever let the world soften you too much. That ruthlessness is your greatest asset." I'd laughed it off then, uncomfortable with the description. I was an artist, a creator, not a ruthless strategist. Now his words felt less like an observation and more like a prophecy. He was someone who operated in the shadows, who understood systems and how to break them. He was the exact weapon I needed. My fingers, now steady and cold, typed out a message. "Julian. It's Lena Rossi. We need to talk. Are you free for coffee tomorrow?" I didn't expect an immediate reply. It was nearly 11 p.m. on a Saturday. He would be out at some exclusive dimly lit bar or perhaps already home, plotting the takeover of some Fortune 500 company. But within 30 seconds the 3 dancing dots appeared and a reply popped up. "Lena. Surprise. Of course. 10 a.m. The Vanguard on Grand. Don't be late." A shiver that had nothing to do with my damp clothes went through me. It was done. The first domino had been tipped. The decision once made felt irrevocable and right. I left the restroom, my back straight, my damp camisole the only visible sign of the ordeal. I didn't scan the crowd for Alex. I didn't seek out Sarah for comfort. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I walked straight through the ballroom, my gaze fixed on the grand ornate doors at the far end, my heels clicking a steady, determined rhythm on the parquet floor. I felt eyes on me again, but this time I didn't feel their pity. I felt their curiosity. Let them wonder. Let them talk. I pushed through the heavy doors and out into the cool night air of the hotel portico. The city sounds were a welcome relief. The honk of taxis, the distant wail of a siren, the murmur of pedestrians. It was the sound of life, of a world moving forward, indifferent to my personal tragedy. I called an Uber and stood under the glow of a street lamp, the yellow light washing over me, making my damp skin gleam. My phone buzzed again. "Alex." I sent it to voicemail without a second thought. As I slid into the back of the quiet, anonymous car, I allowed myself one last look at the glowing, golden windows of the hotel ballroom. In one of those rooms, Alex was probably getting an earful from a furious Mark, or worse, being consoled by Chloe, her hand on his arm, her voice a soothing murmur in his ear. He thought the worst was over. He thought he'd navigated a minor social crisis. He would be expecting me to be hurt, to sulk, to eventually accept his half-hearted apologies. He was preparing for a storm he knew how to weather. He was so wrong. The storm he was expecting had passed. What was coming was a calculated, permanent winter. The blueprint of his nightmare was now complete in my mind, every line sharp, every angle precise. All that remained was the construction. The car pulled away from the curb and I watched the hotel shrink in the rearview mirror. A gilded cage I was escaping, its lights growing smaller and smaller until they were just pinpricks in the darkness, and then they were gone. The Vanguard was the kind of place that served coffee as a form of modern art, deconstructed lattes in beaker-like glassware, espressos so strong and minimalist they looked like a statement on capitalism. It was all exposed brick, reclaimed wood from barns that had never seen a barn animal, and an air of intense, curated creativity. It was not a place Alex would ever set foot in. He preferred the familiar, dependable chain down the street from his office, where the coffee was consistent and the chairs were upholstered. I spotted Julian immediately. He was in a corner booth, a sleek silver laptop open before him, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a quiet, efficient clatter. He looked exactly as I remembered, yet more. The lanky, sharp-eyed intelligence of his youth had solidified into a powerful, contained presence. He wore a simple black cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and his watch was a minimalist piece of platinum and onyx that was less a timepiece and more a declaration of status. His dark hair was slightly longer than it had been in college, swept back from a high forehead, and his gaze, when it lifted from the screen to meet mine, was as sharp and assessing as ever, missing nothing. "Lena," he said, his voice a low baritone that suited the hushed, serious atmosphere of the cafe. He didn't smile, but his expression wasn't unfriendly. Was interested. He closed his laptop with a definitive click. "You look different." "It's been 5 years," I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. The leather was cool and smooth against my skin. "No," he said, his eyes performing a quick analytical scan of my face, my posture, the sharp black pantsuit I'd chosen like armor. "That's not it. You look awake." The accuracy of his observation was unnerving. I had slept maybe 2 hours, my mind racing with plans and the cold, metallic taste of betrayal. But I'd woken not with fatigue, but with a hyperclarity I hadn't felt in years. Every sense felt heightened. The world was in sharper focus. I had put on this suit, pulled my hair back into a severe, low ponytail, and applied my makeup with a precise, almost surgical hand. I looked like I meant business because for the first time in a long time I did. "Something like that," I replied. A waiter materialized, a young man with a carefully cultivated beard and a serious expression. I ordered a black coffee. No sugar, no cream. The old Lena would have asked for a vanilla oat milk latte with an extra shot. When the waiter left, Julian leaned back, steepling his fingers. They were long, elegant fingers, the kind that could equally sketch a devastatingly elegant business strategy or, I imagined, dismantle an opponent with chilling precision. "So, the reunion." I blinked, thrown. "How did you know I was at a reunion?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a rare expression and it didn't make him look warmer, just more dangerous. "Your location on Instagram had you tagged at the Grand Heritage last night." A logical deduction. "And the fact that you're sitting here at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, looking like you're about to declare corporate war on someone, tells me it didn't go well." I took a deep breath, the scent of expensive coffee and Julian's subtle woody cologne filling my lungs. There was no point in dissembling. He would see through it instantly. Lying to Julian Thorne would be like trying to bluff a grandmaster in chess. My boyfriend's first love poured a glass of water on me in front of everyone. He took her side. I laid it out there bare and unadorned. I didn't embellish, I didn't get emotional. I stated it as a fact, a business problem that had been presented to me. Julian's expression didn't change. He didn't offer pity or platitudes. He didn't gasp or shake his head. He simply nodded as if I'd presented him with a fascinating, complex case study. Public humiliation as a power play. Designed to provoke a reaction and test loyalties. And his response demonstrated a fundamental weakness of character. A critical lack of loyalty under social pressure. He paused, his dark eyes holding mine. "What do you want to do about it?" The question was delivered with the same tone he might use to ask about the weather. It was a question of strategy, not morality. I don't want to scream at him. I don't want a messy, dramatic breakup where I throw his things on the lawn, I said, my voice low and steady. I want him to experience a complete and total systemic failure. His career, his social standing, his financial security, his sense of self. I want it to dismantle, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the consequences of his own poor judgment. And I want him to never know I had a hand in it. I want to be a ghost. Julian was silent for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. The waiter brought my coffee, a simple, stark black liquid in a heavy ceramic mug. The silence stretched, thick and heavy as he departed. I held Julian's gaze, not flinching, letting him see the cold certainty in my eyes. An elegant ambition, he said finally. Revenge is often brutish and emotional. What you're describing is architectural. You want to be the ghost in the walls of his life. The termite in the foundation. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his own coffee. Why come to me? Because you understand systems. You understand how to apply pressure to the right points to make a structure collapse. You understand information and leverage in human nature. And because I trust your discretion. I paused. And because I remember what you said to me back in college. About my mind. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine interest there. I remember. I wondered if you'd ever dig it up and use it. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice dropping even though no one was near enough to hear. And what do I get out of it? I'd thought of this during my long sleepless night. Julian wasn't motivated by sentiment. He was motivated by challenge, by gain, by the intricate puzzle of it all. A percentage, I said without hesitation. Alex has a comfortable savings, investments, a 401k. As his life falls apart, there will be financial opportunities. I have access to his accounts, his patterns, his passwords. We can make it look like a series of bad investments, unfortunate market fluctuations, banking errors. You're the strategist. You can make it happen. You take 30% of whatever we siphon. He didn't react to the number. His gaze was intense, almost uncomfortably so. You've given this some thought. I had a long night. The money is secondary, he said, waving a dismissive hand. What interests me is the problem. The engineering challenge. And the architect. His eyes traced the lines of my face. I'll help you. But we do this my way. It will be slow. It will be precise. It will require absolute discipline. And you will follow my lead. No emotional deviations. No sudden acts of mercy. No breaking cover. Agreed. A part of me, the old Lena, the one who had loved Alex, recoiled at the coldness of it. This was a pact with a devil I barely knew. I was signing a contract in blood, my own. But the new Lena, the one with ice in her veins and a blueprint for ruin in her mind, simply nodded. Agreed. Good. The word was a seal. He pulled out a slim silver tablet, his demeanor shifting instantly to that of a CEO launching a new initiative. First, we need intelligence. Full financials, bank accounts, investment portfolios, debt, everything. Social connections. Who are his key clients? Who are his real friends and who are the fair weather ones? We need to find the cracks. The pre-existing stress fractures. Everyone has them. I can get the financials, I said. He uses the same password for everything. It's his childhood dog's name and his graduation year. Buster 2009. Julian gave a dry, humorless chuckle as he typed it into his tablet. Amateur. Get me everything you can. Log in from his home computer today before you leave. Don't download anything. Just take photos with your phone. Secondly, you need to change your life starting now. Move out. Today. Today. The word escaped before I could stop it, a last vestige of the old life clinging on. The element of surprise is critical, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He expects you to be hurt, to sulk, maybe to demand an apology. He does not expect you to vanish. Your disappearance will be the first loose thread in the fabric of his reality. It will unnerve him. It will make him vulnerable, and vulnerable people make mistakes. It's the first pressure point. He was right. Of course he was right. The thought of packing up 2 years of my life in a single day was daunting, emotionally exhausting. But the symbolic power of it was immense. It was a declaration of war delivered not with a shout but with silence. I'll do it, I said, my voice firm. Where will you go? I have a friend from college, Clara. She's a graphic designer. She's been asking me to move into her spare room for months. She'll let me stay. She's loyal and she dislikes Alex. She thinks he made me boring. A flicker of something, approval, crossed his face. Good. Third, your career. You're an architectural designer, correct? At Form and Function? I was startled he knew. Yes. You're talented, but from what I've seen you're playing it safe. Residential additions, small commercial refits. You need a higher profile. You need to become someone he would look at and not recognize. Someone he could never have imagined you could be. Your success must become a constant, galling contrast to his failure. He tapped his tablet. I'm going to introduce you to a contact of mine, Isla Vance. She runs Aesthetic Forward, the most influential design blog in the city. She's always looking for a fresh face with a compelling story. A story? I asked wary. I didn't want my personal life splashed across the internet. The story of a woman rebuilding herself, Julian said, his eyes glinting. It's a powerful narrative. You don't have to give specifics. Just the archetype. A personal setback, a reclamation of self, a fierce new focus on your craft. People will be drawn to it. Your professional stock will rise just as his is about to fall. The contrast will be poetic. The plan was unfolding with terrifying speed and clarity. It was no longer a vague fantasy of revenge. It was a multi-pronged campaign. And Julian was its master strategist. Financial sabotage, social isolation, professional ruin. Each strand was separate, yet interconnected, a web being woven around a man who was still blissfully unaware that he was the fly. We spent the next hour mapping out the initial phases. It was like planning a military operation or a complex architectural project. Julian spoke in a cool, dispassionate tone about leveraging Mark's gambling debts to create a rift, about planting seeds of doubt with Alex's biggest client, a man named Henderson, about the precise timing of the financial mishaps. He was a conductor and the instruments were human lives. As we stood to leave, Julian placed a hand on my arm. It was a brief, impersonal contact, but it sent a jolt through me, a static shock of pure, undiluted intention. It was the touch of a co-conspirator. One more thing, Lena, he said, his voice low. From this moment on, you are an actress playing a role. The role of the woman Alex lost. You will be charming, successful, radiantly happy, and utterly, completely indifferent to him. Your happiness will be his hell. Your success will be his failure. Can you do that? I looked at him, this man who had stepped into the wreckage of my life and immediately started drawing up blueprints for a new one, a fortress built on the ashes of the old. He saw not a victim but a potential ally. A weapon. I was an actress for the last year of my relationship, I said quietly, the realization dawning on me as I spoke. Smiling at his boring work stories, pretending I didn't mind when he forgot our plans, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I was performing the role of the good girlfriend. This time the role will be easier. This time the heart is no longer involved. A genuine, slow smile spread across Julian's face. It transformed him, cutting through the severe handsomeness and revealing something stark, formidable, and beautiful. It was the smile of a predator and it was aimed at my enemies. Excellent, he said. Then let the nightmare begin. I walked out of the Vanguard into the bright, unforgiving morning sun, the bitter, acidic taste of black coffee on my tongue. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I didn't feel like poor Lena. I felt like a weapon that had just been loaded, aimed, and the safety clicked off. My phone buzzed in my purse. Alex. This time I answered. I needed to begin the performance. Lena. Finally. God, where are you? I've been worried sick. His voice was a mixture of relief, irritation, and the faintest hint of a hangover. I'm fine, Alex, I said, my voice calm, flat. The emotion he expected, the tears, the anger, was gone. There was nothing there. It was more unnerving than any scream. Look, about last night, it was a misunderstanding. A huge mess. Chloe felt terrible. She was practically in tears after you left. You have to believe me. Can we just talk? Where are you? I'll come to you. There's no need, I said, unlocking my car. The beep of the doors a punctuation mark in our dying relationship. I'm coming home now. We can talk then. I ended the call before he could reply. The conversation was over. He just didn't know it yet. The drive home was a surreal, silent parade of memories. The route I'd driven 1,000 times, to the apartment we'd chosen together, filled with the furniture we'd picked out, the art we'd argued over, the life we'd built. It was all about to become scenery, props in the final act of a play he didn't know we were in. I was no longer a resident. I was an archaeologist about to excavate my own past. I parked and took the elevator up, my heart a steady, determined drum in my chest. I inserted the key into the lock, the familiar click-a sound that had once meant home. I turned it, pushed the door open, and stepped across the threshold. Alex was waiting in the living room, standing awkwardly in the middle of the rug we'd bought in Morocco. His face was a mask of contrite concern, his hair messy, his shirt wrinkled from the night before. Lena, thank God. He moved towards me, his arms opening for an embrace, his body language pleading for the familiar script of fight and makeup. I didn't walk into his arms. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I stood just inside the doorway, my keys still in my hand, and looked at the man I had loved, the man who had chosen another woman over me. And I began the performance of a lifetime. The look on Alex's face was a study in cognitive dissonance. It was a confused mosaic of relief, frustration, and dawning gut-level alarm. He had prepared for tears, for accusations, for a dramatic scene he could eventually soothe with practiced apologies and grand gestures. He was braced for the storm. He was not prepared for the calm, detached woman standing before him, her gaze as flat and impenetrable as polished stone. Lena, he began, taking a step forward, his arms opening for an embrace that never came. I am so sorry about last night. It was a chaotic situation and I handled it poorly. I was caught off guard. Chloe was she was a mess, you know? He felt so bad. She called me this morning, practically in tears. I remained by the door, my posture unnervingly still. The suitcase I'd retrieved from the hall closet sat by my feet, a silent, ominous declaration. Did she? He blinked, thrown by my agreement. It wasn't the argument he was primed for. Yes. He was devastated. She said she never meant for any of that to happen, that it was a complete accident, and she's horrified that you thought otherwise. I'm sure it was, I said, my tone devoid of all inflection. It was the voice of a customer service agent, polite and utterly impersonal. He stared at me, his script in tatters. Right, so, can we just put this behind us? It was a stupid night. Let's order some takeout from that Thai place you like, watch a movie, just be us again. We can forget any of this ever happened. He was offering the familiar, the comfortable. The path of least resistance. The old Lena would have taken it, starving for the conflict to be over, for the safe harbor of routine. But the safe harbor had proven to be a mirage. There is no us anymore, Alex. The words hung in the air between us, simple and absolute, sucking all the sound from the room. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, waxy mask. What? Don't say that. Don't even think that. This is one stupid fight. You don't throw away 2 years over one bad night. We live together, for God's sake. We're talking about a future. It's not about the fight, I said, finally moving. I walked past him, not towards the couch or the kitchen but towards my bedroom. It's about the choice you made. You saw me publicly humiliated and vulnerable, and you chose to believe the person who caused it. You chose her narrative over mine. That tells me everything I need to know about the foundation of our relationship. It's cracked. I can't build a life on a cracked foundation. I'm an architect, Alex. I know how these things end. I pulled my largest suitcase from the top of the closet and laid it open on the bed with a soft thud. The sound seemed to jolt him into action. What are you doing? He asked, his voice rising in panic as he appeared in the doorway, filling it with his bewildered presence. What does it look like I'm doing? I'm leaving. Lena, stop. This is insane. You're overreacting. He moved towards me, his hand reaching out to grab my arm to physically stop the madness. But I sidestepped him with a fluidity that surprised us both, my movement a clean, sharp evasion. Don't touch me, I said, and the ice in my voice made him freeze mid-step, his hand hanging uselessly in the air. I am not overreacting. I am reacting with perfect clarity for the first time in a long time. I'm not the person you think I am, Alex. And I refuse to be with a man who doesn't have my back. It's that simple. I turned my back on him and began to work with a brutal, focused efficiency. I didn't pack sentimentally. I packed practically, like a soldier breaking camp. My important documents from the lockbox, my laptop and external hard drives, my professional portfolio, my favorite, most expensive clothes and shoes, my grandmother's jewelry. The day-to-day detritus of our shared life, the framed photos from our vacations, the silly mugs we'd bought on a weekend trip to the coast, the throw pillows we'd argued over. I left it all. They were artifacts of a dead civilization and I was no longer its historian. He followed me from room to room like a lost puppy, his pleas becoming more desperate, then curdling into anger as he realized I was truly, implacably serious. So that's it? You're just going to walk out? After everything we've built? You're being a coward, Lena. Running away instead of talking this through like an adult. I paused, a stack of cashmere sweaters in my hands, and looked at him. The anger was a good sign. It meant he was losing control, that his carefully constructed world was fracturing. We built a house of cards, Alex. And last night you blew it down. I'm not running. I'm moving on. There's a difference. Took me less than 2 hours. I was a study in ruthless minimalism. When the suitcase was full, its zipper groaning in protest, and my 2 largest leather weekender bags were packed to bursting, I zipped them closed. The finality of the sound, zip, echoed in the silent apartment, a period at the end of our sentence. "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice hollow now, defeated. He was standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost and boyish amidst the familiar furniture that suddenly seemed too big for him. "That's no longer your concern." I wheeled the suitcase past him, its wheels a low rumble on the hardwood floor. I stopped at the door, my hand on the knob, and turned for one last look. He was just there. A statue of regret in a museum of our past. A part of me, the ghost of the woman I was, ached for him, for the future we had planned that was now dissolving into nothing. But the new woman, the one holding the suitcase, felt nothing but a cold, clean satisfaction. The first move had been made. The first thread pulled. "Goodbye, Alex." I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. A slam would have been emotional, a final, fiery burst of feeling. This was a termination. A clinical severance. The next few days were a whirlwind of strategic action, a welcome anesthetic for the soul. I moved into Clara's spacious, sunlit spare room. She was a fiercely loyal, no-nonsense graphic designer with a tattoo of a vintage camera on her forearm and a zero-tolerance policy for bullshit. She asked few questions, simply handed me a key and a very strong, very dirty martini. "Men are trash, honey. The good ones are fictional. You're better off. Now drink this and tell me what you need." I provided Julian with everything he needed. Using the pretense of needing to check a date on our shared calendar, I accessed Alex's computer and, with hands that trembled only slightly, took photos of his financial dashboards, his investment portfolios, his client list. I sent them to a secure encrypted account Julian had set up. I provided a detailed dossier on his social circle. Mark's gambling problem, his colleague David's jealousy, his client Henderson's superstitions and short temper. Julian absorbed it all with the calm focus of a surgeon reviewing a chart. "The first phase is financial anxiety," Julian explained during one of our brief clinical meetings at a different, anonymous cafe downtown. "It's the bedrock of a man like Alex. His identity is tied to his success as a provider, a stable force. We'll start small. A few unfortunate stock tips from a source he trusts. A small, inexplicable transfer that looks like a banking error, just large enough to trigger an overdraft fee and a frantic phone call. Will create a low background hum of financial unease. It will make him irritable, paranoid. It will affect his judgment." He made it sound so simple. So clean. Like we were adjusting the thermostat in Alex's life, turning it down degree by degree. Concurrently, I met with Julian's contact, Isla Vance. She was a whirlwind of energy and sharp angles, with a severe black bob and a gaze that missed nothing. Over ridiculously expensive kale salads, I gave her a carefully edited, marketable version of my story. A long-term relationship that had run its course, a betrayal of trust, a powerful decision to reclaim my life and my career. I didn't mention Chloe or the water. The specifics weren't important. The archetype was. "I love it," Isla declared, stabbing a piece of avocado with her fork. "The phoenix rising from the ashes of a mediocre man. It's timeless. I want to feature you. Your story, your work. We'll do a photo shoot here in my studio. The architecture of a new life. It's perfect. It's empowering." Meanwhile, my professional life, as if feeding on the dark energy of my secret mission, began its meteoric rise. Isla's profile of me was published. It was a stunning piece, with beautiful, moody photographs of me in Clara's minimalist apartment, standing at my drafting table, a look of fierce concentration on my face. The accompanying essay spoke of rebuilding, both in structures and in self, of finding one's core strength. It was powerful, and it was everywhere in my industry. The response was immediate. My inbox at Form and Function flooded with new client inquiries. My boss, a normally stoic man named Robert, called me into his glass-walled office, not to scold me for the personal publicity, but to offer me the lead designer role on a major new eco-hotel project, the firm's biggest account in years. "You've got a buzz, Lena," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "There's a vitality to your work lately. It's bold. We need to capitalize on it. This project is yours. Don't make me regret it." The contrast was already beginning, just as Julian had predicted. As my star was rising, Alex's was beginning to flicker. He called me constantly for the first few days. I sent every call to voicemail. His messages evolved from angry, "You can't just run away from this, Lena. We need to talk," to pleading, "Please, Lee, I miss you. I'm sorry. Just come home," to confused, "I don't understand what's happening. Is it really just about the water?" And finally, to a sort of bewildered resignation. After 2 weeks, the calls stopped altogether. The silence from my phone was more deafening than the rings had been. Julian kept me updated with terse, progress report-style messages that felt like reading vital signs on a patient. Phase 1 initiated. Subject A showing signs of agitation. Client Henderson, expressing doubts recent portfolio performance. Minor transfer error $1,200 to unverified account created. Subject A spent 45 minutes on phone with bank. Social pressure point identified. Friend Mark has significant debt. Subject A is guarantor on one line of credit. Applying leverage. Rift anticipated within 7 to 10 days. I never asked for the details of the leverage. I didn't want to know. I trusted his methods. I was the client, he was the contractor. I didn't need to know how the wiring was done, only that the lights would go out. A month after the reunion, I was having dinner with Clara at a trendy new farm-to-table restaurant that had been impossible to get into. We were laughing, sharing a bottle of wine, celebrating the eco-hotel project approval. I was wearing a new dress, a deep emerald green that Clara said brought out the new harder glint in my eyes. And then I saw him. Alex was at the bar alone, nursing a tumbler of amber whiskey. He looked diminished. He'd lost weight. His suit jacket, usually impeccably pressed, was wrinkled across the shoulders as if he'd been sleeping in it. His hair was less kempt. He was staring into his glass as if it held the answers to all his problems, his shoulders slumped in a posture of profound defeat. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment his face transformed. The hopelessness was replaced by a flicker of the old Alex, a spark of desperate, hopeful recognition. He started to get up from his bar stool, his mouth forming my name. I gave him a small, polite, utterly impersonal smile, the kind you'd give a vague acquaintance you vaguely recognize from the gym. And then I turned back to Clara, laughing brightly at something she'd just said, a genuine, carefree sound that cut through the murmur of the restaurant. I made sure the laugh reached my eyes. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him sink back onto his bar stool, the hope extinguished from his face, replaced by a stunned, gut-punched dejection. He looked down at his drink, his entire world condensed into that single glass. He was living in the first layer of the nightmare. The confusion, the isolation, the slow, creeping realization that his life was unraveling and he didn't know why. He thought it was bad luck. A rough patch. A perfect storm of financial glitches and professional setbacks. He had no idea there was a ghost in the walls of his life, patiently, methodically, sawing through the support beams one by one. He was standing in a house that was beginning to groan, and all he could feel was the draft. 3 months. That's how long it took for the first major pillar to crack. Julian's updates were like watching a time-lapse of a building's controlled demolition, each message a small, calculated explosion that weakened the structure a little more. Client Henderson has officially withdrawn his portfolio, citing consistent underperformance and a lack of proactive strategy. A glitch in his mortgage payment system has triggered a late fee and a formal warning from the bank. The first mark on a previously spotless credit history. Friend Mark has requested a significant loan to cover gambling debts. Subject A refused. Argument ensued. Social rift confirmed. Mark has been removed from Subject A's emergency contacts. I read these messages with a detached analytical focus, the same way I would review a structural report. They were data points, indicators of progress. The emotional connection to the Subject A in these reports had been severed. He was a project now, a problem to be solved, and the solution was his comprehensive ruin. I was busy, gloriously so, immersed in the creative chaos of the eco-hotel project. The work was demanding and all-consuming, a welcome distraction from the cold, mechanical heart of the revenge plot. The site visits, the meetings with engineers, the late nights refining sustainable material choices, it all required my full attention. In the process, I was becoming the woman I was pretending to be for the public. Successful, independent, creatively fulfilled, and serenely detached from the past. The performance was slowly becoming reality. It was during a site visit, hard hat on and a roll of blueprints tucked under my arm, that my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I was standing in the skeletal frame of what would be the hotel's atrium, the steel beams a latticework against the gray sky. I almost didn't answer, my mind on load-bearing calculations, but something, a cold, intuitive pull, made me swipe to accept, pressing the phone to my ear to hear over the grind of machinery. Lena. It was Chloe. Her voice had lost its polished, purring quality. It was thin, strained, stripped of its confident veneer. It was the voice of someone who was discovering that the fantasy was far less comfortable than the reality. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I walked away from the construction noise, leaning against a stack of raw drywall sheets, the dust tickling my nose. Chloe. This is a surprise. I kept my voice neutral, a blank wall for her to project her desperation onto. I need to talk to you. The words tumbled out in a rush, tripping over each other. It's about Alex. I'm rather busy, Chloe, I said, injecting a note of mild boredom into my tone. What about him? I looked out at the busy construction site, my kingdom of creation, a stark contrast to the world of destruction I was orchestrating for him. He's a mess, she said, and I could hear the frayed edges of frustration in her tone. It wasn't concern for him. It was annoyance at his failure to live up to her fantasy. He's lost a bunch of clients. He's paranoid, thinks someone is out to get him. He's pushing everyone away. He's not the same. She'd almost said, the man I remembered. The man she thought she could reclaim with a snap of her fingers. People change, I said mildly, as if discussing the weather. This isn't change, it's a meltdown, she snapped, the mask of civility slipping completely before she reined herself in with a visible effort I could almost hear. Look, I think a lot of this started after you left. He needs closure, or, I don't know, maybe if you just talked to him, calmed him down. This isn't good for anyone. I almost laughed. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. She was calling me, the woman she'd publicly humiliated and whose relationship she'd deliberately sabotaged, to come and clean up the emotional wreckage she'd helped create. She wanted me to mop up the blood so she could continue playing house in the pristine home she'd imagined. The irony was so thick you could build a wall with it. Chloe, let me be perfectly clear, I said, my voice cool and precise, each word a shard of ice. Alex's life, his mental state, his meltdown, none of that is my concern. You wanted him. You got him. I hope the reality is everything you dreamed it would be. I let the silence hang for a beat, allowing the image of his decline to fester in her mind. I have to go. I have a building to design. There was a long silence on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was small, defeated, and laced with a new, chilling insight. He talks in his sleep. He says your name. The words should have stirred something in me. Pity, perhaps, or a flicker of the old, tragic love. Instead, they felt like a validation. Julian's plan was working on a deeper, more psychological level than even I had anticipated. I had become the ghost not just in his career but in his dreams. My absence was a louder presence than Chloe's could ever be. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I truly was. Sorry for the hollow man he had become, for the pain that was, ultimately, of his own making. But I have to go. I hung up, the ghost of Alex's torment a fleeting, cold satisfaction. Chloe had been the catalyst, but she was already proving to be a feeble cornerstone for his new life. She couldn't handle the reality of a broken man, only the fantasy of a successful one. She was realizing the prince she'd fought for was turning back into a frog, and she didn't have the stomach for the transformation. That evening, I met Julian for a debrief at a quiet, members-only rooftop bar he favored. The city sparkled below us, a grid of endless possibilities and hidden tragedies. He was already there, sipping a neat whiskey, looking out at the skyline as if he owned it. He stood as I approached, a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt strangely natural coming from him. Chloe called me today, I said, sliding into the plush seat opposite him. He didn't look surprised. He never looked surprised. The social pressure is affecting her too. Her association with him is no longer beneficial. It's becoming a liability. She's looking for an exit ramp. He turned his gaze to me, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. You handled it well. It was easy, I shrugged, ordering a gin and tonic from the waiter. A small, private nod to the night it all began. She's realizing the prince she fought for is turning back into a frog, and she doesn't want to get her hands dirty. The financial pressure is now critical, Julian continued, getting down to business. He pulled out his tablet but didn't open it, a sign that the information was now committed to memory. The bad investments have snowballed. He's liquidating personal assets to cover margin calls. His reputation at the firm is teetering. The senior partners are questioning his judgment. The next phase is professional ruin. How? I asked, taking a sip of the cold, crisp gin. Tasted like clarity. The Osterley Project, he said, and the name landed between us with the weight of a tombstone. I knew that one. Alex had talked about it for weeks, late into the night, his eyes alight with ambition I hadn't seen in a long time. It was a massive, legacy-defining account for a new tech giant looking to establish a corporate headquarters. It was to be his career-making deal, the thing that would cement his status as a partner-in-waiting. What about it? A rival firm, Kensington and Gray, has been made aware of his instability through some carefully placed whispers. More importantly, they've been anonymously fed a brilliant rival proposal for the architectural vision of the Osterley campus. A key, differentiating part of the overall pitch. My breath caught. A cold dread, or perhaps it was excitement, trickled down my spine. What rival proposal? Julian took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine. Yours. The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. Wine. I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I'm an architectural designer, not a financial advisor. I have nothing to do with that pitch. The proposal isn't for the financial structuring. It's for the architectural vision. The soul of the project. Kensington and Gray loved it. They've integrated your concepts. The biomimetic facades, the suspended walkways, the central water reclamation feature that doubles as art, into their final presentation. It's the centerpiece of their pitch. When Alex presents his stale, numbers-heavy, utterly conventional pitch, he'll be competing against a vision that is not only superior but, according to the whispers my contact started, was inspired by the innovative, rising star work of Lina Rossi. The contrast will be devastating. He'll look outdated, uncreative, and worst of all, he'll know your fingerprints are on his failure. It will be personal. I stared at him, the audacity of the move stealing my words. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. It wove my success directly into the fabric of his failure. It wasn't just about him losing. It was about him losing to me even when I wasn't in the room. He would see my creativity, my talent, used as the very weapon that destroyed his ambition. How did you get my work? I whispered, a flicker of outrage cutting through the cold strategy. Those were my concepts, my private sketches, the unformed ideas in my portfolio. You left your digital portfolio on the cloud. Shared access with your old university email. It wasn't difficult to access. He said it without a hint of apology. It was a tactical maneuver. I had an associate pull some of your conceptual eco-designs, the ones you deemed too out there for your current clients. They were perfect for the Osterley brand. It was a logical synergy. I should have been furious. My work, my personal creative output, used as a weapon without my consent. But looking at Julian's calm, determined face and thinking of Alex's face in that moment of realization, the dawning horror that the woman he'd betrayed was now the specter haunting his biggest professional defeat, I felt only a dark, thrilling sense of anticipation. It was the most intimate attack yet. When is the pitch? I asked, my voice steady once more. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The following day passed with an agonizing, leaden slowness. I tried to lose myself in the tactile world of material samples and structural diagrams, but my mind was in a sterile boardroom across the city. I imagined Alex in his best suit, rehearsing his lines, believing he was about to reclaim his narrative. I imagined the confident smiles of the Kensington and Gray team, my designs glowing on their screen. At 3:30 p.m. my personal phone, the one Alex still had the number 4, lit up. His name appeared on the screen. He hadn't called in over a month. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later a text came through. It was not the coherent plea of before. It was fragmented, desperate. Lena. Please. I need to talk to you. I saw your designs. At the Osterley pitch. How could you do this to me? I didn't reply. Let him wonder. Let him ache. Let him stare at his phone and will it to light up with my name just as I had once done with his. Let him feel the crushing weight of silence. An hour later, as I was packing up my desk for the day, Julian's message arrived. It was a single triumphant line, the verbal equivalent of a knife sliding between the ribs. Target neutralized. Osterley account lost. Subject reportedly left the building in a state of extreme distress. Professional pillar compromised. I leaned back in my chair, a long, slow breath escaping my lips. It was done. The second pillar, his professional pride and ambition, had been shattered. And I had been the instrument of its destruction, my creativity the bullet. The revenge was no longer an abstract plan. It was a living, breathing thing, and it had just tasted blood. It was hungry for more. The foundation was cracked, the walls were groaning, and the roof was about to cave in. The loss of the Osterley account was the kill shot to Alex's professional reputation. Julian's subsequent message filled in the brutal, clinical details. Official reprimand from senior partners. Placed on administrative leave, to reevaluate his focus and client approach. Effectively, he's been benched. Morale at the firm is low. His failure has impacted team confidence. I imagined him in his sterile, glass-walled office, the one with the view he'd been so proud of, packing a single cardboard box with his framed finance degree, his expensive pen set, the stupid stress toy I'd bought him as a joke. I pictured his colleagues averting their gaze, the whispered conversations ceasing as he walked past, the pitying looks that were worse than contempt. The golden boy tarnished beyond repair, his luster replaced by the patina of failure. His texts when they came were no longer pleas. They were the raw, unfiltered output of a man watching his identity disintegrate. Was this your plan all along? To destroy me? I know you're behind this, Lena. I don't know how, but I know it's you. The bad luck is too perfect. Please. I'm begging you. Just tell me why. Why are you doing this? I never responded. My silence was a deeper wound than any accusation I could have made. It forced him to live inside his own head, with his own guilt and paranoia as his only companions. He was building his own prison brick by brick, and my silence was the mortar. Every unanswered text was another lock on the door. My life, in stark, beautiful contrast, was a whirlwind of success. The feature with Isla Vance had acted like a rocket booster on my career. I was invited to speak on a prestigious design panel at the city's annual Urban Innovation Forum, my name listed alongside established industry veterans and celebrated visionaries. The invitation felt like a coronation. The day of the panel, I took extra care with my appearance. I chose a sharp cobalt blue dress, the color of deep confidence and intellectual rigor. Its clean lines and architectural cut a testament to who I had become. My hair was styled in loose, effortless waves that took an hour to achieve, and my makeup was flawless, enhancing my features without hiding the sharp, intelligent light in my eyes. I looked like a woman who had not only survived but had been refined by fire, tempered into something stronger and more valuable. Backstage, in the hushed, carpeted chaos of the conference center, my heart fluttered with a familiar pre-performance nervousness. The moderator was running through his notes, the other panelists, a renowned sustainable materials expert and a celebrated urban planner, were chatting quietly. I felt a sudden, dizzying sense of being an imposter. Who was I to be here? Then a calm, steadying presence appeared at my shoulder. I didn't need to turn to know it was Julian. Nervous? He asked, his voice a low murmur meant only for me. A little, I admitted, smoothing the non-existent wrinkles from my dress. It feels big. Don't be, he said, his gaze scanning the bustling backstage area before returning to me. You're the most compelling person on that stage. The others are technicians. You're a storyteller. Just be the woman you've become. They'll be captivated. His faith was a tangible thing, a shield against the doubt. He wasn't just my strategist anymore. He was my anchor. When I walked onto the stage, the bright lights washing out the first few rows of the audience, I found him immediately. He had taken a seat near the back, but his attention was absolute, an unwavering focus that cut through the sea of faces. Knowing he was there watching not the performance but me steadied my breath and cleared my mind. The discussion flowed easily. I spoke about the poetry of sustainable materials, about designing spaces that breathed with their environment, about the responsibility of shaping the world we live in. I was articulate, passionate, and when the materials expert got bogged down in technical jargon, I translated it into human terms, drawing a laugh from the audience. I was in my element. But when the moderator, a sharp-witted journalist, turned to me and asked, "Lena, much of your recent work and the powerful narrative around it speaks to a personal journey of rebuilding. How does that inform your creative process?" I didn't shy away. I looked out at the audience, my gaze briefly connecting with Julian's. "I think we are all architects of our own lives," I said, my voice clear and carrying through the silent hall. "And sometimes, you have to be willing to tear down the old, unstable structures, the ones built on shaky foundations or compromised materials, to build something new and truly resilient. It's painful. It's messy. You sift through the rubble and you wonder if anything is worth saving. But on the other side is a freedom and a strength you never knew you possessed. You learn that the most important structure you'll ever design is your own character." I didn't look at Julian, but I could feel his approval like a physical warmth radiating from the back of the room. It was a better reward than the applause that followed. After the panel, as I was surrounded by a small crowd of well-wishers, networking contacts, and a few journalists, I saw him. Alex. He was standing at the very back of the room, partially hidden in the shadows near the exit, as if he couldn't bear to fully enter the light. He looked gaunt, older than his years. The suit he wore was the same one he'd had on at the bar, but it hung looser on his frame now. His eyes were hollow, dark smudges of sleeplessness and despair beneath them. He was holding a plastic cup of water, but he wasn't drinking it. He was just staring at me, a look of profound, gut-wrenching loss on his face, as if he were watching a star that had once been his shoot across a sky he could no longer reach. Our eyes met across the crowded room. The noise of the chatter, the congratulations, the clinking of glasses, all of it faded into a dull, muffled roar. In his gaze I saw the full, unvarnished wreckage of what I had done. The career in shambles, the social isolation, the psychological torment, the financial anxiety. I saw the nightmare I had engineered, given human form. He was the living, breathing monument to my vengeance. For a single heart-stopping moment, I felt a surge of something awful. Not regret, but a terrifying, vertiginous recognition of my own power. I had done this. I had taken the man I once loved, the man who had held my hand and talked about babies and beach houses, and I had reduced him to this haunted, broken specter. The magnitude of it was staggering. He took a step forward, then another, weaving through the crowd towards me. His movement was jerky, unsteady. My small group of admirers parted slightly, sensing the raw, desperate intensity of his approach. "Lena," he said, his voice a dry, raspy thing. He was close enough now that I could smell the stale whiskey on his breath, see the tremor in his hand. "Alex," I replied, my tone polite, distant, the way one might address a persistent salesman. "I didn't expect to see you here." I kept my posture open, unthreatened, a queen receiving a subject. "I had to see you." His eyes searched my face, desperate for a crack in my composure, for a flicker of the woman he knew. "I know it's you. I don't know how, but I know you're doing this. The lost clients, the bad luck, the bank errors, the Osterley project." His voice broke on the name. "I saw your designs. They were yours. How could you? Why? Was it really just because of one stupid night?" The crowd around us had gone completely, raptly silent, eavesdropping on the drama. I looked at him, this broken man, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty calm. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that remained was the truth, cold and hard as diamond. "It wasn't a stupid night, Alex," I said, my voice soft but carrying in the hush. "It was a revelation. You showed me who you were. And I simply believed you." The simplicity of my statement, the utter lack of malice, seemed to confound him more than any complex accusation would have. He flinched as if I'd physically struck him, his body recoiling from the truth. "I lost everything," he whispered, his eyes glistening with unshed tears of self-pity. "No," I corrected him gently, as if explaining a basic concept to a child. "You made a choice. And choices have consequences." I saw the understanding dawn in his eyes, bleak and absolute. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a conspiracy he couldn't prove. It was cause and effect. He had chosen Chloe's side in a moment of public crisis, and the consequence was the total annihilation of the life he had built. The nightmare had a cause, and the cause was him. He opened his mouth to say something more, a final futile plea, but just then Julian was at my side. He didn't touch me, didn't put a possessive arm around me. He simply stood there, a solid, immovable presence, his silence a louder statement than any words. He was aligned with me. He was part of my new world, a world of success and power that Alex could never access, a world he had forfeited. "Lena, your car is here," Julian said, his voice a low murmur meant only for me, but in the silence everyone heard it. I gave Alex one last, pitying look. There was no triumph in it, only a vast, unbridgeable distance. "Goodbye, Alex." I turned and walked away, Julian falling into step beside me, a united front. We didn't look back. We left Alex standing alone in the ruins of his life, surrounded by the buzzing evidence of everything he had thrown away. He was finally living in the heart of the nightmare, and he knew with a terrifying, soul-crushing certainty that he had built every crumbling wall himself. The encounter at the panel should have been the end. The culmination. The final, satisfying click of a lock. I had seen the destruction firsthand, looked into the eyes of my ruined enemy, and felt the cold, clean satisfaction of a mission accomplished. The objective was achieved. So why, in the days that followed, did I feel so hollow? The frantic, focused energy that had fueled me for months was gone. Julian's messages ceased. The war was won. I threw myself into the eco-hotel project with a manic intensity, but the designs that had once felt like a passionate expression of my new self now felt like sterile lines on a page. The vibrant colors of the material samples seemed muted. The world had been drained of its texture. The revenge had been a dark, consuming star, and now that it had burned out, it left only a cold, empty space in its wake. Clara noticed immediately. "You're moping," she declared one evening, handing me a glass of rich red wine. We were in her living room, surrounded by her bold, graphic art. "You got what you wanted. The guy is a publicly humiliated, professionally ruined shell. You're the city's new it designer, fending off clients with a stick. You should be out celebrating. You should be levitating with joy." "I am," I said, but the words rang as false as a tin coin on marble. "Are you?" She fixed me with a knowing look, her head tilted. "Or did you pour so much of yourself into being an avenging angel that you forgot to figure out who you were supposed to be after the fire and brimstone? This," she gestured at me, "this quiet, listless thing? This isn't you." The Lena who moved in here was fierce. She was a fucking Valkyrie. Where did she go? Her question haunted me, echoing in the new, quiet spaces of my mind. Who was I now? The kind, trusting Lena was dead and buried. The vengeful, plotting Lena had achieved her goal and was now, effectively, unemployed. I was a weapon with no target, a ghost with no house to haunt. I had become so identified with the destruction of my old life that I had no blueprint for the new one. It was in this state of limbo, this post-war emptiness, that Julian found me. He didn't call or text. He simply showed up at my construction site, looking impossibly out of place amidst the raw concrete and swirling dust in his impeccably tailored charcoal coat. "We need to talk," he said, his breath misting in the cold, damp air. He didn't take me to a cafe or a bar. He drove me to a hidden park, a sliver of untamed green tucked like a secret between the glass and steel of skyscrapers. We walked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the crunch of frozen leaves under our feet and the distant, muffled hum of the city. The trees were skeletal against the gray sky, a landscape in hibernation. "The objective is achieved," he stated finally, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Alex resigned from his firm this morning. He's listing his apartment. The financial losses are substantial and irreversible. His social circle has evaporated. The nightmare, as you called it, is complete." I nodded, my throat tight. I stared at the frozen ground, at the intricate patterns of frost on a barren flower bed. "Good." He stopped walking and turned to face me, his gaze intent and searching. "Is it?" The directness of his question, the intensity in his dark eyes, was unnerving. Julian, who had been my co-conspirator, my strategist, my unflappable general, was now looking at me as if I were a complex equation he couldn't quite solve. "He deserved it," I said, the words sounding defensive even to my own ears. I'm not questioning that, he replied, his voice surprisingly gentle. I agreed with the assessment and I executed the strategy. I'm questioning the cost. To you. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling the cold deep in my bones. What cost? I'm fine. I'm better than fine. I'm successful. I'm free. You're empty, he said, his words a quiet verdict. I've been watching you. The fire you had, the fierce, brilliant light that ignited after the reunion, it's gone. You used it all as fuel for the destruction. You burned it up. You didn't save any for yourself. Tears, the first I'd shed since that night in the hotel bathroom, pricked at my eyes. I turned away from him, blinking them back furiously. I wouldn't cry for Alex. And I certainly wouldn't cry for myself in front of Julian Thorne. It felt like a failure of the highest order. What was I supposed to do, Julian? I whispered, my voice raw, the professional facade cracking to reveal the bewildered woman underneath. Let him get away with it. Let him and Chloe walk off into the sunset while I played the heartbroken ex? Was I just supposed to take it? No, he said firmly. He moved to stand in front of me, forcing me to look at him. His face was stark and serious in the weak winter light. What you did was necessary. For the woman you were. It was the only path forward from that moment. But that woman is gone. The question is, what does the woman you are now want? I looked up at him, truly seeing him for the first time since this began. Not as the architect of revenge, but as the man. The man who had stood by me through the darkest, most ruthless chapter of my life. The man whose belief in my strength had never wavered, even when it was directed toward such a dark purpose. The man whose presence had become my anchor, the one fixed point in my spinning world. I don't know, I admitted, the confession feeling like a surrender. I thought this would make me feel powerful. And it did. For a while. But now it just feels cold. It feels like I've been living in a winter country and now the spring won't come. Revenge is a cold country, Lena, he said softly, his gaze holding mine. It's a place of stark landscapes and short, brutal days. It's not a place to build a home. You went there to survive. But you don't have to live there. He reached out, his leather-gloved hand hovering near my cheek for a moment, a gesture of aborted comfort, before he let it drop back to his side. The unfulfilled touch was more intimate than any embrace could have been. When I first met you for coffee, he continued, his voice low and steady, I saw a spark in you that had been buried under years of compromise. A sharpness, a will. I agreed to help you not just for the intellectual challenge, but to see that spark become a flame. I wanted to see you win. Not just against him, but for yourself. I wanted to see you use that formidable mind to build, not just to break. And did I? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the tears now tracing cold paths down my cheeks. Win for myself? You tell me. His dark eyes were deep, and in their depths, I saw not the reflection of the vengeful ghost I had become, but the image of the woman I could be, strong, creative, and whole. A woman who could build, not just destroy. A woman who could feel something warmer than the cold satisfaction of a job completed. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hollow feeling began to fill, not with the cold ashes of revenge, but with a new, fragile, terrifying warmth. It was the realization that this man, this brilliant, formidable, often terrifying man, had seen the very worst of me. My rage, my ruthlessness, my capacity for cold-blooded planning, and he was still here. He wasn't afraid of my darkness. He had, in fact, helped me wield it. And he believed, with an unshakable certainty, that I was meant for more than darkness. I'm tired, Julian, I said, the fight finally leaving my body, my shoulders slumping. The admission felt like laying down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for months. I know, he said. So rest. The war is over. He didn't try to comfort me further. He didn't put his arm around me or offer empty platitudes. He simply stood with me in the quiet, dying light of the afternoon, a solid, steady presence amidst the ruins of my old life and the uncertain, frozen ground of the new. He was a fellow survivor, acknowledging the cost of the battle without flinching from it. As we walked back towards the city streets, the sounds of traffic slowly replacing the park silence, I realized the ember of feeling I had for him wasn't new. It had been smoldering for weeks, banked under the all-consuming fire of my revenge. I had been so focused on the destruction of my past that I had refused to acknowledge the quiet, persistent pull of a possible future. Now that the fire was out, the ember glowed, persistent and warm, a tiny, defiant sun in the winter he had just described. The nightmare I had built for Alex was complete. It was a finished, perfect, terrible work of art. But perhaps in its cold, silent aftermath, a second chance was quietly beginning to dawn. Not with a fanfare or a dramatic declaration, but with a quiet walk in a frozen park, a pair of tears finally shed, and the unwavering gaze of a man who saw the architect in me, not the wrecking ball. The finality of Alex's defeat was confirmed not by a dramatic confrontation, but by a terse, legal email from his lawyer, requesting I formally sever my name from our shared lease. A mere formality since I'd long ago removed it, but the official bureaucratic stamp on our separation. There was no personal note, no last plea. The fight had been bled out of him. He was a closed chapter, a book shelved in the archives of my past. The silence from his direction was now absolute, and for the first time it felt peaceful, not strategic. The emptiness I felt in the days that followed was different now. It was no longer the hollow victory of the Avenger. It was a quiet, expectant space, a blank canvas waiting for its first stroke of color. Claire had been right. I had been so fiercely focused on dismantling my old life, on being the wrecking ball, that I hadn't once considered the blueprint for the new one. What did I want my days to look like now that they were entirely my own? Julian was a constant, perplexing, and increasingly central presence. Our interactions were no longer about strategy or intelligence reports. They were about everything else. He'd show up at my office with coffee that was just how I liked it, somehow knowing I'd skipped breakfast in my rush. He'd send me links to obscure articles on biomimetic architecture or the psychological impact of communal spaces, knowing they would fascinate me and spark a long, winding email exchange. He asked for my opinion on a complex corporate acquisition he was consulting on, valuing my perspective not as the scorned woman he had helped, but as a sharp, creative mind with a unique way of seeing systems. We were in my temporary studio at Clara's, the large drafting desk covered in sprawling sketches for the Eco Hotel's central atrium. The winter light was weak but bright, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Julian was standing over my shoulder, his presence a warm, solid weight at my back. He pointed to a particularly ambitious concept I'd been toying with, a series of suspended, glass-walled walkways inspired by tree canopies, connecting the hotel towers high above the ground. This, he said, his finger tapping the tracing paper. This is the one. It's bold. It's risky. It's utterly you. I sighed, leaning back in my chair and rubbing a smudge of charcoal from my cheek. The clients think it's too expensive, too unconventional. They want something safer, more rectilinear. Then they have no vision, he stated simply, as if it were an irrefutable fact. Fight for it. You've fought for darker things with far more ferocity. Fight for your light, Lena. It's worth it. His words unlocked something in me. He was right. I had harnessed all my strength, my intelligence, my sheer bloody-mindedness for a project of pure destruction. What could I build if I channeled that same ferocious energy into creation? What kind of beauty could I will into existence? I fought for the canopy walkways. I prepared a stunning, immersive presentation, using virtual reality to let the clients experience the dappled light, the feeling of floating among the trees. I crunched the numbers until I could prove the long-term value and marketing appeal outweighed the initial cost. I argued with a passion and cool logic that I had learned in the crucible of my revenge. And I won. The clients, initially hesitant, were won over by the sheer, unshakable force of my belief. The victory was sweeter, purer, than any I had experienced in the long, dark campaign against Alex. This was building. This was life. After the meeting, Julian was waiting for me outside the client's office, leaning against his car. The late afternoon sun was a sliver of gold on the horizon, painting the glass buildings in hues of fire. The air was cold and crisp. Well? He asked, though from the small, knowing smile on his face he already knew the answer. We're building tree houses, I said, a genuine, unburdened laugh escaping me, the sound foreign and wonderful to my own ears. His smile widened, a rare, full expression that transformed his entire face, carving lines of warmth around his eyes and mouth. It was a smile that promised things. I never had a doubt. We started walking aimlessly the way we had in the park. The silence between us was no longer filled with tactical plans. It was filled with a comfortable, buzzing awareness, a current of something unspoken that had been building for months. "The financial transfer is complete," he said after a while, his tone matter-of-fact. "Your 70% is in the offshore account. It's a significant sum." I'd almost forgotten about the money. It felt like blood money now, tainted by the misery and paranoia it represented. It was a relic from the cold country. I didn't want to build my future on it. "I don't want it," I said. He stopped walking, genuinely surprised. It was a rare sight. "What?" "I don't want it," I repeated, the decision solidifying into absolute certainty as I said the words aloud. "Use it. Donate it anonymously to a fund for financial literacy for women. Or burn it. I don't care. That money came from a place of hate. I don't want my new foundation poured over that. I want to earn my own future." Julian looked at me, a deep, unreadable emotion in his eyes. It looked like respect. It looked like awe. It looked, I dared to hope, like love. "As you wish." We walked on, the setting sun giving way to a velvet blue twilight, the first stars pricking through the urban glow. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had finally put down a heavy, poisonous burden I'd been carrying for a lifetime. "What now, Lena?" Julian asked, his voice quiet in the evening hush. "Now," I said, looking up at the emerging constellations, feeling a sense of possibility so vast it was almost terrifying, "I think I'd like to build something beautiful. And maybe get some dinner. I'm starving." He laughed, a rich, warm sound that I realized I wanted to hear for the rest of my life. "I know a place." The restaurant was a small, family-run Italian spot, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. It was the antithesis of everywhere Julian usually went. It was warm, noisy, and authentically shabby, with checked tablecloths and Chianti bottles serving as candlesticks. There were no deconstructed dishes, just robust, honest food that tasted of comfort and generations of love. It was the antithesis of everything my life with Alex had been: polished, predictable, and ultimately fragile. Over shared tiramisu, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our childhood dreams. He'd wanted to be a cartographer, mapping unknown territories. I'd wanted to build castles. We talked about our favorite books, our secret fears. He told me about the immense pressure of being the fixer, the loneliness of holding other people's secrets, the weight of so much manipulated fates. I told him about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love was enough to withstand any storm, and the woman I was slowly, painstakingly learning to become. A woman who knew that love was not a shield, but a choice to build something strong enough to withstand the storms together. "You know," I said, swirling the last of the rich, dark wine in my glass, "when I first came to you, I thought I was hiring a strategist. I didn't realize I was finding." I trailed off, the words too immense, too fragile to speak into existence. "A witness," Julian finished for me, his gaze soft, his hand covering mine on the table. His skin was warm, his grip sure. "Someone to see you through the storm and remind you that the sun still exists on the other side. Someone to build with." Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they were warm, cleansing. They were tears for the beauty that could come after the ruin. Yes. That. Walking back to his car, the cool night air felt different on my skin. It wasn't the cold that had chilled me after the spilled water. It was invigorating, full of the scent of coming snow and new beginnings. Under the glow of a vintage street lamp, its light a soft, buttery yellow, he stopped and turned to me. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his expression serious. "A professional one." "Oh," I asked, my heart giving a little skip. "I'm starting my own firm. Strategic development, but with a focus on ethical and creative enterprises. I don't just want to fix broken companies, I want to help build great ones from the ground up. Companies with a soul. I want you to be my partner. The creative director. Your vision, your sense of structure, your humanity, it's what's been missing from my work. It's what's been missing from me." My heart soared. It was more than a job offer. It was an invitation to build something together from the ground up. Something clean and strong and beautiful. Something that was entirely ours. "Yes," I said without a moment's hesitation. 1,000 times yes. He smiled, that rare, full smile that made my breath catch. "Good." He walked me to my car door. The moment stretched, filled with the unspoken tension that had been building for months, a current finally reaching its source. He cupped my face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. "This," he whispered, his eyes searching mine for permission for a truth he already knew. "This is no longer part of the strategy." "No," I agreed, my voice barely a whisper, my heart hammering against my ribs. "This is for us." And then he kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of frantic passion or desperate need. It was a kiss of promise. It was slow and deep and tasted of red wine and a future I had never dared to imagine. It was the foundation of something new, laid not on the cracked ground of betrayal, but on the solid, tested bedrock of mutual respect, witnessed pain, and a love that had been forged in the darkest of fires and had chosen deliberately and joyfully to step into the light. As I drove home, my lips still tingling, the ghost of his touch on my skin, I thought of Alex. His nightmare was his to live now, a closed room in a house I had left forever. My story was no longer a reaction to his. It was my own. He had chosen his side at that reunion, never knowing his nightmare had begun. And I, standing in the ashes he had forced me to create, had chosen mine. I had found not just revenge but a second love. A love that was brighter, stronger, and more real than the first had ever been, because it saw all of me, the creator and the destroyer, and loved me for both. The revenge was complete. But my life at long last was just beginning. The end.